Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Tim Talks Music. I'm Tim Butler, and we've got another cool interview for you. The other day, I had the pleasure of talking to Tony Scalzo from the band Fastball. Fastball was a chart topping 90s band with their hit songs The Way and Out of My Head. So, I hope you enjoy my interview with Tony Scalzo. What is your earliest musical memory?
I'm probably singing with my mom in Sunday school and stuff. I guess, little nursery rhymes. But then, the TV's on, the radio's on in the car. And I was probably maybe 5 or 6 when I started really like hearing the radio and hearing songs on the radio. And it was a good time. At least for me, I'm probably older than your dad, but we're talking about the late 60s, on the radio, you heard all kinds of great stuff. And it was great stuff on TV. Um, by the time I was about 6, my parents decided I should take piano lessons. So I did that and never really thought about it being any kind of novelty or anything. I just thought that's what, you do. So I'm very grateful to be brought up early with a musical education.
Mm.
Um, and I was in school bands and stuff. So I played the trumpet in band, and then I moved over to like low brass in the orchestra and then the marching band. And but was really gravitating. By high school, I was way into rock and guitars. So I thought, that's where I wanted to point my prow. I was like just way into guitars, even just to see a guitar, even if it was being mimed on TV, like lip sync on the Mike Douglas show or something. I would just want to see that guitar. And that's still, I mean, it's a focal point for me. I drew my attention right to your wall behind you. And so just been into it. And then I could keep going. You don't have to interrupt me if you don't want to. I got really into the idea that I could possibly do that. Like I could do that. Um, like the guitars were really big, and I was not. So, once I got into the ability to actually wield a guitar, um, I was just learning some stuff on acoustic. I tried taking lessons. I didn't understand why we were learning finger picking and classical stuff that I just wasn't interested at all. Today, I'm sorry that I didn't really get those chops. That would have been really helpful in retrospect. However, the pianos helped me a lot, and I developed an ear very early. So having an ear was a thing that has kept me in music. I mean, a lot of people, they might be doing the band thing, do the rock and roll thing, especially in the latter part of the 20th century. That was a super big hobby that people did, and then after a while, maybe they just sort of like, put it away, got a real job or whatever. I do know that just about everybody I knew in Southern California in the 80s was part of some band or part of some scene and going to shows and also being able to see bands from around the world come and see them before they're really big. You could go to places in Hollywood where they had clubs and you could see bands coming through that other parts of the country might not be able to see. Um, so that kind of helped fuel my vast, rock and roll influence and just the interest and the enthusiasm for it. I read a lot of books. I always wanted to see movies about whatever. Um, about whatever band, and like the Beatles movies were really great for me, and I couldn't get enough because back then you couldn't really go see a band. I mean, plus the Beatles were already broken up by the time I was interested in the Beatles. So all I had was this cartoon called Yellow Submarine, which not even them talking, but it's their music, and it's this vibe anyway. And the Beatles signed off on it anyway, so that counts. And
Mhm.
plus they appear at the end, and that was really, to me, that was really the awesome, most ultimate thing is to actually see them. And
Right.
they're like, "We're here. I've got a hole in me pocket." Blows up this hole, and you're like, fucking Beatles are amazing. And just like, and that's all you get, just a little snippet. And then they're done until they have this incredibly boring movie called Let It Be. And it's, an hour and 45 minutes of them just being depressed and befuddled and can't really figure out what to do. They don't show the parts where they actually come get it together, and it turns into two albums literally. And so, here I am talking about the Beatles. Um, so they were huge for me, right? The Beatles. And, later on bands like Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith and, whatever was the sort of flavor of the day. I started getting into more British bands later. Um, and when punk rock came around, that was like the thing where you like a lot of your friends may have rejected what was happening at the time.
Mhm.
They got rid of all their rock records and cut their hair and just rejected it. And I've never been into that. I've never been into like revolution on a cultural level. I think that, I like the way things sort of need to happen. I understand that they need to happen, but I mean, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna like be rejected, and I'm not gonna reject. I think that our present should always be informed by the past, and that's how we can go wisely into the future. And I think culture is what it's really the foundation of a happy life, collectively or individually. I think it matters. And you know that's where I don't know, you might need to help me steer this bar.
So, can you describe your beginnings in the Austin music scene, and has the Austin scene changed at all?
Yeah, sure. Both Joey and Miles from this band are from Austin. In other words, Joey was born and raised in Austin, but not born, but raised in Austin. And Miles grew up in Laredo, Texas, which is kind of different from Austin. It's down there in the river, the valley. And but he went to college in Austin, and he started playing in bands in Austin. And it was a pretty rich independent scene that had a built-in audience of college students because it's a giant University of Texas. Plus, San Antonio is there, so you have this rich culture of not only Tejano music, conjunto music, and Spanish, music that's so rich, from the valley to the south of Texas. It just really um, it colors what's in my mind musically since I moved here. Okay, I'm not from here, but I've been here longer than any other place I've ever lived. Okay, like I said, I'm from Southern California. I got here in 1993. And those guys were already sort of ensconced and part of the scene. I knew some people already, and uh, like I said, there was lots to do because people came, uh, just like LA, people would come through Austin, but they'd come through on the weekdays, which is interesting. In LA and New York, they'll be there on the weekends because those are major markets. But they'd come through Austin, and it would be a Wednesday or a Thursday. And it was really amazing to see a lot of bands from the 90s just sort of coming up. And I mean, I guess I can name drop a few. I mean, Uh, Especially during South by Southwest, there's always everybody's just converging on it during that time. So bands like, I don't know, like Supergrass, if you remember them from the 90s, or um, they were just, it was the spot to sort of get seen by a lot of people from the industry that were, there for that week, right?
Hmm.
During that time. So, and that's a good barometer for how things have changed, South by Southwest, because South by Southwest wasn't even called a festival. It was called a music conference. And it was literally an industry conference set up by people of the city of Austin to invite industry people to come and see showcases, which they would actually very efficiently set up these parties and gigs. And it started attracting lots of, marketing people, and they expanded to a film festival and to, obviously the internet came in pretty hard by the time the mid 90s were around. So they got an interactive branch of South by Southwest. And by, you know, you give that 15 years plus ACL is happening, in the fall. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's like massive, you know, music festival in Austin, Austin City Limits Festival, right? And by that time, 15 years in, I had lived here and Fastball had already made it, and we were traveling around the country and come back, and it's so big that you got Lady Gaga playing on the Doritos stage, and it's just kind of like it's become what it's become. And I think it still attracts. I think it's kind of toned down a little bit to its benefit and to everybody's benefit, because now it's become accessible again, and people can come and maybe actually do something productive
Hmm.
while they're there and get heard by some people and get written about by journalists. And yeah, so Austin, I moved away from Austin actually last year. I'm close enough to where, I have I actually have children in Austin, so um, they're uh, they're adults, but they're close enough. I'm out in a smaller town on the outskirts, and I like it very much.
So in 1997, Fastball was touring with Matthew Sweet.
That's
Um,
right.
do you recall a show that you played in Philadelphia on a university campus in an old gymnasium?
Sure, I do. It was very cold and very rainy that night. I do
Uh,
remember that. Yes.
yeah, my dad actually booked that show.
Is that right?
Yeah. So
Yeah, I don't remember much of the show, but I remember pulling in and just kind of like it is here today.
mhm.
It's like 30, 33 and rainy, not snowy, just rain. And I remember that.
I
I
believe
remember a
actually,
lot of that. I remember a lot of that. We were in a van. Matthew was on a bus. We were in a van. We were in a van for a long time, and we went to buses, and we lived pretty large for a while, but by 2002 or 2003, we were really back to basics again. We didn't have any tour support of any kind, and we weren't really on a label anymore. We kind of just, started doing our thing more independently, and now things are pretty good. We're independent again, but we're doing great, getting a lot of good opportunities. I think that just sticking together has helped a lot, and continuing to make music has helped us grow. After you get to a certain age, um, even the lifers start to kind of fall away a little bit, and don't do things as much. Even and I'm young, I can do a lot of stuff. I can still travel and and play and go on the road and, live out of a suitcase. And it doesn't really take too much out of me, but, I could see it being problematic, 10 years time. And like I said, we're there, and a lot of people, they sort of drop off, and you end up being, you step into those spots. And,
Mhm.
I hate to be crass about it, but those sticking around provides its own opportunities.
Well, so Fastball once described themselves as lacking a musical category to fit into and hard to write down what we do in a sentence. How would you describe your sound in the Magneto USA days versus now?
Yeah. So during that time, that's the first name incarnation of this same three guys. I mean, just another name, but it's a good category because of it's a certain time and it's a really short time. It's a brief moment of really just trying to ape what was happening on the radio. I mean, look, I wanted the shortest trajectory to the opportunity to, you know, be more expansive musically. I wanted to be able to get to a studio with a producer. I wanted to be able to play on bigger stages. I wanted to be able to like have somebody encourage us to, do things more proactively. I mean, we were already pretty proactive, and it's funny because this is an analogy I've sort of been thinking about lately. You drive that vehicle, you sort of like build this car, that's your van, your van. You build this car, this vehicle, that's your band, and you make sure it's running properly and you got gas, and you drive it and you drive it and you drive it until you get this awesome vehicle that's success, right? It's like, and then the success, you can't drive that anymore. It feels like this is my own personal, you know, uh, reduction of it. I think that after a while, you become driven by the thing and you're the passenger. And, that new driver decides it's time to get off, maybe, and you end up with no ride. So you have to figure out how to build another car. And, after three albums on Hollywood Records, which is, a lot of money, a lot of capital is put into those projects, right?
Mhm.
With the expectation that it's going to be paid back tenfold, hopefully. That's the dream of the record industry person. And naturally, we agree with some of those principles. we want to we want to grow too and get paid, tenfold in the effort that we put in, but that doesn't happen most of the time. Most of the time, it doesn't happen. In art, you work and you work to make something good, in my opinion. And it might not be something that everybody cares about, or people don't get to hear it.
Mhm.
There's all kinds of factors. But um, we got lucky at a certain time to get um, our songs played on the radio and be on television and travel the world and all that stuff. And fortunately, even though it ended, we still have that as a thing to work from and to
Right.
build on top of. And we figured out ways to really build on top of it well. And and we continue to make new music. And I can't express how stoked I am about the recent work we've done over the last three projects have just been, to me, stuff that I can actually listen to. And I will say that I was proud of some of our stuff, but I mean, now I'm like, we've really got it together. And as far as let's go back to the self-description that maybe one of us or just me or I don't know. You said that we said that we described ourselves as music that you couldn't really categorize. And yeah, I just feel like it's kind of just 20th century uh, pop music, guitar based rock and roll. Yeah, there's influences there, but I mean, look, it's just another form. I mean, we're not a jazz band. We're not a country band. We play country music sometimes. Um, some of our stuff could even be construed as jazz influenced, and yet, we are what we are. I don't think we're not Ween, we're not like, we're not just so like, or Negative Land or something that's just so like you don't expect what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen next. I think that I think people want that from us. Our fans want that from us. A certain reliability, so to speak, musical reliability. Like you could count on fastball. Uh, we're going to give you a hook. That's where I'm at. I love music and especially love Western music that just sort of, comes from that classical beginning and European, Bach, Mozart, Haydn, all the way up to the 20th century, and then um, bring in the indigenous musics of different areas and throw it all together, and you get these amazing hybrids, and that's the infinite possibilities of music. And it makes me just really think that's the most important thing. I don't, I labor over lyrics a lot. And it's funny because the ones I labor over the least end up being the most, um, I don't know, lasting to me, like the most enduring. Um, and it's just funny. It's just funny that way. I'm really going for a melodic hook with a nice, you know, with some kind of cool textures around it.
Yeah.
That's that's all. That's all I ever really want. I want something that's going to be fun to play and fun to sing in front of people and watch their faces when I come to the part that I like and see if they like that part too.
Yeah. So, how did you find the distinctive sound for The Way from such a morbid news story?
Well, the news story really did come first, and I read it, and I don't know why it came into this weird sort of tango thing, but that's really where it comes from. The actual form of the song comes from this tango like verse.
Mhm.
So it's minor, minor. It's a minor 1 4 5 really um, progression if you're talking about music theory. And then, it merges from all of that into a major kind of breakthrough where it's all of a sudden there's light shown upon this story. And then back to the minor part. It's just this sea change that occurs throughout, right?
Mhm.
But, the way I demoed it was on a keyboard that had its own ideas of how this progression might sound. Okay. So um, I literally pressed a couple keys, pressed a couple buttons, and it's sort of a home keyboard toy instrument hybrid, not an expensive, you know, studio instrument, but more like something you'd buy at a Best Buy or something like that. And that's the way that it wanted to play it. and you hear all these other things like, but it's not a guitar, it's not anything.
Right.
It's this keyboard. And you take this keyboard, and I'm not worried about any kind of like, legal repercussions because I don't even remember what the model was myself keyboard at this point. But we used it and we figured out a way to make a loop out of it,
Hmm.
right? To cut it, to tape record it, literally record it on tape. And then cut it in places to make it stay, true to the rhythm and then the arrangement. And then we played over that. We played drums and bass and guitars over that. And then that guitar solo, and that's really it. I think the darkness comes from the initial tango form.
Right. Yeah.
Uh-huh. If you want to be technical.
So how did it come about that both Billy Preston and Brian Setzer played on your album The Harsh Day of Light? Of
Well, when you're on a major label like Hollywood Records, which is it's a subsidy of Disney music. At the time, it was literally Disney's pop music record label.
Mhm.
And so there's lots of money and there's lots of resources and no one's looking and you're making a record and Julian had Billy Preston's number. That's Julian Raymond, the producer
Mhm.
of Harsh Light of Day. And he had Setzer's number. And we had both those guys, come in on separate dates. They weren't in there together.
Right.
But it's interesting when you have people like that and you know who they are and you know all the history. It seems daunting at first, and then when you're actually working, all that just sort of goes away and you're just working. That's the way I felt about it. And I've had the opportunity to work with some pretty great people, and I always feel like when we're all doing music together, that we're all, it, I can see the human
Mhm.
element, and that we're all just really basically the same. We all have different ideas about things, and yeah,
And you also worked with Adam Schlesinger from Fountains of Wayne on Keep Your Wig On. Did he
correct.
pursue you or did you pursue him? And are you a Fountains of Wayne fan?
Oh, I am indeed a Fountains of Wayne fan. I think they're one of the most interesting and overlooked bands of the 90s and early 2000s.
I agree.
They were already awesome before their biggest hit, Stacy's Mom. They were awesome. They just had great music and great songs. And Chris Collingwood and Adam together made it almost just like fastball because you have these two writers. You have a main singer though with Fountains.
Mhm.
Um, I just thought that was a great way for them to, sort of diversify their music, their songs. Um, some of their songs are pretty progressive as far as like the lyrics and the storytelling. I really love, and some of them are kind of abstract. Like there's a song called "I'm Just a Hat and Feet." Have you ever heard that song?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, I think it's on one of their early albums. And then that song, which is an amazing song called Radiation Vibe.
Yeah.
Know that song?
Mhm.
That's a great. Yeah,
Yeah.
anyway, so I don't know why we were talking about Adam. Oh yeah, well he did. He produced a bunch of tracks with us for Hollywood. I don't know who produced who, but I mean who approached who, but I'm pretty sure it had something to do with our A&R guy, and he probably got us together. I know we went to Nashville first, and we spent about a week there doing stuff, and it was slow going. we got a couple of things, and we started working with this really great um, idea that Adam would sort of build these loops off of what we were doing, jamming in the studio, and he'd make these groovy loops, put them together, and then we'd try to write songs around that. Well, we just didn't have enough time to make it work, I feel like. It would have been really very cool. Um, some of it sort of popped up on our Patreon. For members of our Patreon, they can go back and see a lot of the weird stuff that we did that didn't get released commercially. And it's nonetheless interesting to us and to our fans. Um, and then we were able to go back with him and do a couple more recordings into his studio in New York. And I've always wanted to work with him again. Unfortunately, our cruise ships sort of like diverged, and he got very, very successful and very hard to hook up with after a time. And I was very sad to learn, right away, as soon as the pandemic hit, that he was one of the first victims of COVID.
Yeah.
Uh, and he passed away in early 2020. He always like took the subway to work, and so that's what happens sometimes when there's a worldwide pandemic. It's very sad. Um, uh, I think that if he probably had been aware, he would have survived.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
he just didn't know. No one knew yet.
Yeah. And to what do you credit keeping the three original members of Fastball together for 30 plus years?
I think that one of and I've said this, it's kind of a weird answer, but I think it's more the lack of super success. Okay, so we never had this mega success that can sometimes tear, you
Right.
know, bands apart, especially if they're a band, and if you've got two guys who write and two guys who sing. Um, I don't know. We weren't we weren't successful enough to lose perspective of what it is that we have that, is important together.
Hmm.
We weren't given enough time. We knew that we had to sink or swim during times of being dropped by the label, going to another label, getting dropped by that label. So we knew we had to do what we had to do. And um, you know, that makes you weigh things out, and you weigh out what could I do on my own? What could I do with these guys? And it turns out I could do a lot more with those guys. There's more there's more substance. It's a three-dimensional animal that is called fastball, and it has, facets. Um, and that's really the way I feel. I don't think it's rocket science. I do think it's a certain balance occurred, and a recipe, and the ingredients all meshed in a way that it didn't die young, and it didn't it also didn't, like, blow up and implode afterwards.
Right.
So
Now, I only have a few more questions for you. Just want to let you know. But have you enjoyed touring and playing with shows with other iconic bands of the 90s? And do you have any favorite moments?
my favorite moments are like the most recent ones, because there was a long time, and this is my fault, where I sort of had a bad time of it, because I was like, I would think about it in the way of like, oh, we're not like them, we're not like this band, or here we are opening for this band, and feeling like it's not appropriate. We don't fit into this. Um, and I'm not saying that. Uh, well, I am saying I thought we were better. You know, I thought we were a better band and we deserved more, and that's really just me being frustrated. And if we were really better, then we probably put on a better show and we'd probably have more people coming to our shows. And little by little, I started losing that attitude because look, we've been opening up for bands like Sugar Ray and Everclear
Mhm.
and Vertical Horizon and all these bands that, it's not really my taste, you know, but it didn't help me to think that, you know, that we don't belong there. It would help to feel grateful that we're being invited along and
Right.
and I'm just trying to lay down some wisdom and honesty because lately I've accepted these roles that I felt were foisted upon me. And now I accept them and I feel more comfortable with it. Having just come back, returned from a very successful voyage on the first 90s cruise ever,
Whoa.
right? So we just did that. And we were out for a week with Lit, Everclear, we were out with Digital Underground, we were out with Lisa Loeb and the Gin Blossoms and Collective Soul, and yeah, man, it was insane. And Gin Blossoms are good friends, so a lot of my change in attitude I attribute to touring with the Gin Blossoms because they're really great guys, and we do hang out, and everybody loves each other, and um, it's always a pleasure to work with them, and we're planning on going out this summer with some old friends and new friends. We've never toured with Guster before. We've never played with Guster. I've always been a bit of a fan. Not way deep into their music, but stuff I've heard over the years. I've always thought, man, that'd be a cool band to play with. And then our old friend Sugar Ray, we're going to go out with them for half of it, Guster for the first half, and Sugar Ray the second. But the headliner is Bare Naked Ladies. So
Mm.
out with a band that we went out with way back in 1998 on the very last Horde tour. Horde, Horde, right? It was the thing that John Popper from Blues Traveler started, and it was pretty successful for about 8 years, and then it stopped. And so we haven't seen those guys since back then. So 25 years of 25 plus. Wow. We're excited to go out on that. That's going to be June and July. We will be in your area, I'm sure.
Yeah, we
And
were actually hoping to see you at the Met in
okay,
Philadelphia.
in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yep.
Yeah.
We'll be out all summer.
Oh,
We're only going to be playing about a half hour though,
okay.
every night. Yeah.
I did also get to see you guys at the Keswick Theater with Everclear and the Nixons, I think back in 2022, I believe.
Oh, great.
That was
Yeah.
a really great show.
That was a fun tour.
Yeah. So, what can your fans expect from your most recent album, Sonic Ranch, and your upcoming tour that you mentioned?
Well, that's funny you should ask. Probably not going to be hearing a ton of material from Sonic Ranch on a tour where we only play half-hour sets.
Right.
Probably throw in 2 or 3 songs from it, but mainly you're going to get Out of My Head, The Way, Fire Escape, You're an Ocean. That's just the way it goes. You know, uh, we are playing a few shows before we go out, and we're going to be filling up that time afterwards with longer, more headline-y tours where we're like the main
Right.
act. Um, you know, but we can't turn down such a great opportunity. We're going to be in front of a lot of people, and uh, it's going to be good.
Nice. And
Our record, to speak for the record, I would say that, you know, it was something we worked pretty hard on because we were with a label this time,
right.
this record, and we had an A&R department. Um, helping sort of like weed out stuff and try to add in things. And
Mhm.
hadn't done that in a while, so that was a challenge and got through that pretty well. And I think the record's better for that input. We had a really good producer in David Garza, who is an old guy from Austin we've known forever, and we called it Sonic Ranch because we recorded it at a studio called Sonic Ranch out in West Texas in the desert. It's an isolated, um, I would call it a compound kind of, but it's really a hacienda kind of deal. Like it's a farm, really. It's
Mhm.
a pecan farm, and it's not really a ranch. There's no cattle there, but there's a bunch of studios there, and you're isolated from anything really. Besides, you can sort of hear the train and I-10 in the background, but for the most part, you're left alone to work on your stuff. And I think what came out of it, kind of has that flavor in it. Definitely, there's a lot of vastness and looking at the moon kind of songs. It's good stuff. I think I hesitate to use. We had a video person who always said things were magical, right? But you know what? She was right, and this record does have a lot of magic in it, and we got it from where we were physically, and where we were spiritually at the time. And I think everybody should check it out. That's hearing this. Just go to Spotify and check out our new record and listen to it all the way through because it's less than a half an hour. Well, maybe 33 minutes. You could do that.
Yeah. So I got one more question for you, and answer it in any way you would like. Do you have any words of wisdom for any up and coming musicians and songwriters?
Uh, yeah. Yeah, don't be in too much of a hurry. You got a lot of time. Uh, don't be in too much of a hurry, but also try to keep your stuff simple
Mhm.
and stretch out, but also know your limits and you know work within those limits to the best of your ability so that you can find a way to expand more and go to maybe find other doors and windows to other things. And when you're writing, just try to be yourself and try to use your own voice and try to figure out what your own voice is. Because, man, there's a million great singers out there and they do all this great stuff and their voices are pretty
Mhm.
and maybe that's the reason we like certain songs, but for me, there's nothing beats uh, a song that's written by the person who sings it in their own voice,
Right.
if you're hearing me.
Yeah.
And I believe that that's why we like Joni Mitchell. That's why we like the Beatles. That's why we like, you know, all these great artists Johnny Cash, it didn't sound like anybody else. Willie Nelson.
Yeah.
So there you go.